Good morning and welcome to the Point. It's another very busy week in presidential politics here in Michigan. We started off the week in Macomb County. That's where the Republican vice presidential candidate Mike Pence was talking about continuing tensions in the Middle East and who he blames for them.
We stand here tonight enjoying this sumptuous meal and good fellowship. The American soldier is once again in harm's way. Retaking Mosul, they go with our prayers, but remember, they are going to refight and re-win territory that had already been won and would have been secured but for the failure of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to secure the gains. And the vacuum they created literally was the environment in which ISIS was able to rise up and trample vast areas that had been won by the American soldier. Remember, when you go tell your neighbors and friends, it was Hillary Clinton who initiated that disastrous agreement with the radical mullahs in Iran. They got $150 billion. All we got was a promise of delayed ambitions. The leading state sponsor of terrorism is now on track someday down the road to obtain the world's most powerful weapons. And the worst of it was on the very day that they released 4 American hostages. This administration, with Hillary Clinton's full assent, delivered $400 million in cash on a wooden pallet to the airport in Tehran. Let me make you a promise. When Donald Trump is president of the United States, we won't be paying ransom to terrorist-sponsoring states. They'll be paying a price if they threaten or detain American citizens or our allies. And lastly, it was Hillary Clinton and her State Department. You've got to tell your neighbors and friends this. It was Hillary Clinton and her State Department who left Americans in harm's way in Benghazi. After 4 Americans fell, she told the families of the fallen that it was because of a filmmaker back here in the States. When Congress would find out through their diligence that she knew the night of the attack that it was an Al-Qaeda-style terrorist attack. When she was confronted before the Congress about that, she said words that ring really ignominiously into history. She said, and I quote, "What difference at this point does it make?" Well, let me just say, as the proud father of a United States Marine, anyone who said that, anyone who did that, should be disqualified from ever serving as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States of America.
On Tuesday, it was the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Senator Tim Kaine, talking about his plan to do away with poverty.
So let me tell you what Hillary and I plan to do to help our low-income Americans and the communities that have been left out or left behind, what we would like to do if we have the honor to serve, and what we would like to do working in partnership with this community and others. First, the entire progressive economic agenda that we have is aimed at creating more growth and fairness. So nearly every major priority in the first pillar of the 3 pillars of the campaign, an economy that works for all, not just for a few, will help families living in poverty. When we talk about making the largest investment in jobs since World War II, that will help more families climb out of poverty. When we talk about reducing barriers for those in the workforce by providing child care or paid family leave, equal pay for women, that will help more families climb out of poverty. When we talk about making sure Wall Street never wrecks Main Street again, or renegotiating NAFTA, or rejecting trade deals like TPP that won't create more jobs or raise wages, or when we talk about having a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect low-income consumers from abusive loans, ultimately these economic pillars, which are broad in scope, will help families climb out of poverty too. I'm proud of the progressive agenda that we have, and I'm proud that Hillary hasn't backed away from bold, principled commitments that she made when she won a very fairly and vigorously contested Democratic primary against a great colleague and friend, Bernie Sanders. We are progressives who want to get things done, and we believe getting things done is good policy and good politics. So that's the kind of campaign we're running, and if we're successful, that's the kind of administration we'll lead. But I want to focus today not on the general policies that will help deal with poverty, but on the specific things. What are the parts of the agenda that are specifically targeted at addressing poverty? And I want to talk about 3 sort of pillars. Hillary and I are looking at a comprehensive approach, and the first pillar is we've got to raise incomes for working families and just put more money in people's pockets, raising income for working families. And the second thing we do is we have to make sure every family has a safe and healthy home and neighborhood, because that's the foundation for economic success. And finally, we've got to make sure that all our kids have the education and skills they need to get ahead and provide for their own families one day. That's how we're going to break the grip of generational poverty. And all of this is achievable, and all of this is affordable, and it shouldn't be too much to ask for the wealthiest nation on earth.
But it's not all about presidential politics. There's also the question of who will control the Senate and the House. I talked with Senator Debbie Stabenow about the possibility that her party, the Democrats, could take over in the upper chamber. How confident are you that you will go back in the majority?
Well, I'm hopeful for Michigan that the Democrats will be in the majority, because that means I'll be chairing the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee as we write another farm bill, which is very important for us. And it also puts me in a much stronger leadership position for Michigan. So I think it's still tight. I think it's still close. I'd say a slight edge for Democrats, but I have a feeling it's going to go right down to the wire.
If you come back 51-49 either way, it's going to be very difficult to govern, isn't it?
You know, it's going to be interesting, because if it's 51-49, then I think we have an extra responsibility to govern, and that means our colleagues on the other side going to continue to use the filibuster like they have with President Obama, or are folks going to get what I think is the real message? Public wants us to get things done. They want us to create jobs and lower the cost of college and deal with the things that directly affect working families every day.
Then it was time for the big debate. Donald Trump defending himself against accusations by women that he acted inappropriately, and Hillary Clinton talking about Trump's taxes.
She mentions this, which is all fiction, all fictionalized, probably or possibly started by her and her very sleazy campaign. But I will tell you, what isn't fictionalized are her emails, where she destroyed 33,000 emails criminally, after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress. What happened to the FBI? I don't know. We have a great general, four-star general, today, you read it in all the papers, going to potentially serve 5 years in jail for lying to the FBI. One lie. She's lied hundreds of times to the people, to Congress, and to the FBI. He's going to probably go to jail. This is a four-star general, and she gets away with it, and she can run for the presidency of the United States. That's really what you should be talking about, not fiction, where somebody wants fame or where they come out of her crooked campaign.
But of course, there's no way we can know whether any of that is true, because he hasn't released his tax returns. He is the first candidate ever to run for president in the last 40 plus years who has not released his tax returns. So everything he says about charity or anything else, we can't prove it. You can look at our tax returns. We've got them all out there. But what is really troubling is that we learned in the last debate he has not paid a penny in federal income tax. And we were talking about immigrants a few minutes ago, Chris. You know, half of all immigrants, undocumented immigrants in our country, actually pay federal income tax. So we have undocumented immigrants in America who are paying more federal income tax than a billionaire.
But it's not all about presidential politics. There are 110 state house seats that are up for grabs here in Michigan. We'll look at one of those races when we come back to The Point. Welcome back to The Point. Those state house races will be voted on all over the state. One of them in Kalamazoo County features Republican incumbent Brandt Iden and Democratic challenger John Fisher.
Well, you've obviously had a taste of what it's like to be in the state legislature, and you're running for re-election. What is it that motivates you to run? Because it's always a pretty big job, and obviously there's competition.
Absolutely. Well, I was so excited by what I was able to see the past year and a half. We're continuing to move Michigan forward. Over 450,000 private sector jobs created in the past 5 years. I mean, unemployment here in Kalamazoo County is below 4%, and I've been part of that, and I'm very excited to continue that momentum. I mean, you have to keep your foot on the gas. Just like any growing business, if you stop, it dies out, and we need to continue to do that in the state legislature. So I'm excited to keep running, to keep working on that, and keep growing jobs, and keep growing our economy in Michigan.
Where are we in that process? Because obviously the unemployment rate reflects strong employment, but the jobs aren't necessarily the strongest jobs, and they aren't all full-time jobs. We know that this economy is still weak in some areas. What can you do at a state level to bolster those jobs that are already out there?
Well, you're absolutely right, Rick. What I'm hearing from my employers across the board is that because of so many job openings, what they need is skilled trade and skilled labor. And so as we look at that, we need to look at more career technical education. We need to make sure that we are training our young people for the jobs of tomorrow in Michigan. And that's how we're going to grow our economy, is making sure that we've got that sound base. I mean, in the last decade, we had more U-Haul trucks going out of the state than were coming in. And because of that, we lost a lot of skilled trades. And we need to refocus on that to make sure that we, again, train our young people for tomorrow's economy.
One of the things I hear a lot about is infrastructure. You guys struggled with a bill to fix Michigan roads. Democrats have been very critical of that bill. It won't be fully implemented for a number of years, but there's other infrastructure out there that we've clearly seen with problems with water and other issues. How do you approach that going forward? And I might suggest that I would throw in roads and bridges, because there are many that believe there's not enough cash in that either.
Yeah, and you're right to be critical of that. I've heard that. I've been knocking on a lot of doors, talking to a lot of constituents this campaign cycle, and I've heard that. Brand, it's not enough money, not quick enough. And so we're going to get there, and I understand that, but I heard it from the other side as well when I was taking votes on this. Brand, it's too much money, and we got to balance that. So first and foremost, we got to make sure that the dollars are coming in and that we're doing what we said we were going to do. It's a 5-year plan. It's a 5-year phase-in to get to the $1.2 billion that started this fiscal year, October 1. We need to make sure that we continue that first and foremost. So the dollars are there to build that infrastructure. Secondly, when we look at other infrastructure, we need to make sure that the state stays on top of these things. And some of the things that I think that we're looking at are some forms to civil service and some civil service reforms to make sure that people have the tools that they need at the state level as well, and that our employees have the tools that they need to make sure that they have the knowledge to keep Michigan safe and keep Michigan residents safe.
This isn't about an election coming up, so I don't want to get too far off the beaten path, but when I hear civil service reform, that sounds like an issue for lame duck. Is that something you'll see sooner rather than later?
I'm not sure. I know that it's leadership's focus. I know that it came through one of my committees in the House, and I know that it's something we're going to look at, but I also know there's a lot of other things on the table as well. I know that energy is going to be there, and we've got to take a look at that too, and it's going to be a busy lame duck, that's for sure.
Well, when you talk about that, energy and maybe some other issues that are out there, and maybe some of those specific plans that some term-limited legislators might try to get something done before they leave after their 6 years, but you take something like energy. It's been out there for a couple of years in a number of different incarnations. Do you feel like the legislators have been up to speed enough on the different incarnations, because it has to do with choice, it has to do with having a reliable flow of energy if there is choice, and getting into choice and back into the grid? I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. That's a lot of information that needs to be processed, and I think that's one of the reasons we've taken so much time with it. They've had a lot of testimony, obviously in the Energy Subcommittee on this, and I believe that our members are getting more familiar with it. Now, obviously, very busy time during October, and it might take the focus a little bit away from that, but I know that this is going to be a priority for the caucus, because we need to ensure that Michigan's independence energy independence is right here in Michigan, and that we're not relying on Indiana, Ohio, and other places for our energy.
For more than 2 decades, I've watched these races for the State House, and I've always heard about one thing. Both sides talk about their dedication to education, and the party in power says we're doing the right thing for education, and the party that's opposing says they're not doing enough. Usually comes down to dollars and cents. Give me your take on education. When it comes to the real future for the kids here in Kalamazoo County and elsewhere, is the state doing the right thing in education with funding and the way the money's being spent?
That's a great question, and one that I hear about a lot. It's always one of the top 3 priorities. You're right, for anybody running for office. I will tell you that I think we're doing very well. Is there more to be done? Absolutely. We put Michigan, it started October 1. We put more dollars into education this year than we've ever had before. And I understand that there's more that needs to be done, and we can continue to stay focused on that. But in terms of the dollars, I think we're there. Now we just need to continue to make sure that we're doing the right things in the classroom, and we're making sure that those kids have the skills that they need to be successful.
When you look at the landscape of Lansing, and you know that there's a lot of angst with government out there this cycle, I would suggest that it has been for a while, but it's really come to the forefront this year. Do you think that Lansing has done anything to allay the fears of people who say you guys just don't work together and you don't get anything done?
I think that always comes out in an election year. I mean, I think it's easy for people to forget that 90% of the things we do in Lansing are always very, very bipartisan. The bills that I put forward in the past year and a half have been incredibly bipartisan. I continue to work with my colleagues here in Southwest Michigan from both sides of the aisle because that's important to us. But that happens in a campaign season, especially in a campaign year, especially in October when people are getting the mailings and they're seeing it on television. But that's not necessarily the case. I believe that we do work well together, and that'll continue no matter which party's in power, I believe.
One of the things that you can never, ever really quantify, but this year more than ever, is whatever pull or drag comes from the top of the ticket. Now, as you and I talk, and this may not air for a few days after, this has been a tumultuous time, and I probably didn't have to put that codicil in because it will have been a tumultuous time no matter when it airs, for the presidential election. Going into November, not knowing exactly what the relative weakness or strength of the Republican Party candidate is going to be, does that have an impact on the outcome of state House races?
I get this question a lot, and I really believe that House races are retail politics. It's meeting with your constituencies one-on-one. It's doing the parades. It's knocking on doors. It's taking those coffee hours. It's listening to folks. It's teletown halls. And I believe that the constituents, especially in my district for sure, can separate top of the ticket from further down the ballot. They want people who are focused on their corner of the woods, that are focused on their districts, that are doing the right thing for Michigan, and that have the right future for Michigan. And I understand it's easy to get distracted with the top of the ticket, with everything that's going on. People want to talk about it, and I understand that. But really, I think that they can kind of see through that and say, look, our state House members are truly there working for us. They're working every day. They're doing all the things that I just laid out. And that's how they make their decision, in my opinion.
Talk to me about your life experience. What have you done that brings you to this point?
I have a wonderfully rich and full experience. I come from a family of machine repairmen, journeyman, union machine repair, millwrights, electricians. But then I became a United Methodist minister. But before that, my undergraduate was aeronautical engineering, and I picked up my aircraft maintenance license. So I went from working with my hands to working more with my heart and with my mind, trying to make God accessible to all people. Over the course of the years as a local church pastor, I've gained some remarkable skills in leadership and politics. You can't survive in a local church without being pretty good at politics. But it's the politics that brings people together. So when I was serving the church in South Haven, I was able to draw together 7 different denominations and community leaders. We had a Hope Reformed, First Baptist, St. Basil's Catholic, Episcopal, Epiphany Episcopal Church, First Congregational, Peace Lutheran, and First United Methodist came together, and we formed a restorative justice panel so that the young people who made some silly mistake or did something wrong, rather than going through the criminal justice system, they were diverted so that they could meet their people they had offended face to face and be restored. It worked out really well. And that's the type of thing that I want to take to Lansing. The ability to work with a multitude of people who don't always think each other is even Christian, let alone can work together. And it would be improper of me, I think, to not use these tools, not offer these tools that I have gained through life to go to Lansing and serve the people of my home.
Well, that brings me to my second question that I always ask is, why do you get involved? But I think you've explained that at least to a large degree. So now that you've made that choice to get involved, what is it that you would hope to achieve? Because as you well know, you would be joining 109 other not so like-minded people over there because everybody comes with their own ideas.
Well, one of the first things is trying to build a more cohesive group that actually works to serve people. To that end, I'll spend time getting to know the other 108 people, because in order to work together, you have to know each other. Then we've got to get back to creating jobs that pay enough that people can actually live and thrive, where families can thrive in the area. And we also need to reinvest in the infrastructure. It's very clear what happens. We're going to be paying a long time for the catastrophe of Flint. We got to take our water, sewer, our electrical grid, not to mention our roads and bridges. But the other big issue for me is public education. Ever since the government got involved in public education, Michigan has gone from one of the top education systems in the nation to the next to last. We are now fighting Alabama to be the worst education state in the country. That's a disgrace. We can do much better. We've got to get the party politics out of education and help to bring together the educators and the administrators so that we can move forward and reinvest and re-empower our educators to do the good job that they're capable of.
Well, let's go back to the first thing you talked about. When you talk about infrastructure, this governor was trying to find a way to work on roads and bridges primarily. There were some other transportation issues in there. They came up with a plan that many in your party say falls short, and it certainly is stretched over a long period of time. But some of those other issues you talk about, when you talk about water and sewer and electric, and maybe you would even include in that, broadband and those kind of things, where does that kind of money come from? Because it gets really expensive really quick.
The tax code is always needing to be adjusted, and right now it's gotten out of sync. The taxes on retirees and common working people have actually increased, whereas the taxes on corporations and on the people who have most benefited from the economic boom of our area have decreased in a percentage rate. And so we have to rebalance that and make sure that everybody is paying their fair share.
On education, you talk about trying to get education back up to the level where it was. What's the answer?
Well, if I had that, I would have plenty of money and be doing really well. I don't have the answer, but I know what is not working. And what is not working is the sense that competition brings out the best. I know that our schools and the teachers within the schools do best when they collaborate and not compete with each other. Two, we have to fully fund our education. They came out with a study this spring that pointed out we're funding education at about 80%. And that's just not, that's really penny wise, pound foolish. That's not acceptable. We also need to begin to change the way the payment goes to schools. Right now, every student is worth the same amount of money. But not every student costs as much to teach. Kindergartner and a special needs high school person are drastically different. So we need to come up with categories so that the people who don't cost as much don't have as much money coming with them, and then the people who cost more have more money coming. It's one of the problems you have now is, particularly with the charter schools who are not held as accountable as public schools, but they take the less expensive kids to teach, getting the full benefit. And as soon as those students become more expensive, they send them back to the public school. But the public school hasn't had the advantage of those funds during those years. That simple change would help a great deal.
We're almost out of time. When you take a look at Lansing or Washington, what is your assessment on how government works in today's environment?
I have great interest, but no true answers to how to make Washington work. That's why I'm going to Lansing. And right now, we've allowed people to dig in and try to define themselves as the only true arbiters of truth and what'll work. And that simply is wrong. That's one of the things my life as a local church pastor has taught me. One of the rabbis that I listened to one day said, no one is so smart as to be wrong 100% of the time.
The Libertarian in that contest, Ryan Winfield, did not respond to our request for an interview. We're back next with more To the Point. So now we move just more than 2 weeks before Decision 2016. This is an important election year. Big decisions for you to make from president right on down the ballot. Between now and then, we'll try to bring you as much information as we can to keep you updated. And of course, we'll follow the trajectory of the race. All of that's what we'll be doing between now and then and next Sunday when you join us at 10 o'clock on Wood TV 8 for To The Point.